This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Hi, this is Jim Lee, and you're listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast.
Hi, I'm Dan Jurgens, and you're listening to the Batman Universe.
Hey, this is Scott Snyder, and you're listening to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Batman Universe Comic Podcast, episode number 280. I'm your host, Dustin, and today I have with me...
This is Steph.
And this is Ian.
And we're bringing the latest comic news from the weeks of August 18th through the 31st of August. We have very, very little to talk about this episode, but we do have two books as usual, and we do have some stuff from Monkey Watch as well as one comment. As far as news goes, though, we have one specific thing to discuss, which is solicitations, which, as I mentioned on the last episode, released right before we recorded the last episode, but I was unable to get them typed up. But I have them typed up now. So, DC released the solicitations for November, and to be honest, there isn't a whole lot of surprises. The recent 6-month streak of new titles and series has come to an end, with the only new announcement being a one-shot tying into the Batman White Knight universe, but it's also taking the place of the issue of Batman Curse of the White Knight in November as well, so it doesn't really add anything to the overall number. Despite a number of series wrapping up in October, the new series announced are all outside of the Batman universe, and there was a bunch. There was Genlock, RYBY, or RWBY. Ruby! Yeah, Ruby. There was that. There was a Masters of the Universe series. There's a bunch of series that had just been announced, but none of them pertain to us here at TBU. So, Tales from the Dark Multiverse will feature Blackest Night Infinite Crisis, as we talked about in the last episode, while the Year of the Villain one-shot seemed to have come to an end in October with absolutely no more new titles announced for November. A couple of series will wrap up in November, including the Harleen series from Stepchen and Sajic, Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's supposed last foray with Batman and Batman Last Night on Earth, and Brian Michael Bendis' Event Leviathan. Could these three titles wrapping up mean coming months we have something new in store? Event Leviathan and Deceased, which wrapped in October, already are leaving a pretty big hole to fill when it comes to overall DC Universe event titles. Outside of Doomsday Clock still needing the final issue to be solicited, Three Jokers is the only other major title expected at some point in the near future to be announced. There are no new dollar comics or facsimile editions as part of the main Batman universe either. Between that and no fifth week in November, the total number of issues drops over a quarter. From October from 40 issues that we will be covering on TBU down to a mere 29 for November. When I read that out loud, it's daunting. But it means that I guess November I could have a little bit of a break. Yeah. Look at the bright side. Anyway, moving on to creator changes, Mikel Janin comes on to Batman for the next two issues as King's final arc seems to be a showcase of the previous artists he has worked with on his time on Batman. I doubt David Finch will be making a return, though. David Messina is coming on to Red Hood Outlaw, while Francis Manapul is heading over to Justice League in November. Everything else stays on the same current path for now. Not a whole lot to discuss this time around as we head into winter. You can check out the full details of everything hitting in stores in November, as well as a gallery of some of the covers coming up over on the site. The gallery is pretty extensive because there's a lot of really cool covers, especially with some of the acetate covers that are coming that were previously advanced solicited in October, but we have them as part of our November solicitation breakdown. So take a look at that. There's a lot of cool stuff, at least with the covers. Unfortunately, to be fair, I'm not saying that I desperately need any more Batman comics right this second, because actually after 6 6 straight months of adding new books and nothing really wrapping up, that is a lot of stuff that we needed to get coverage for, at TBU at least. So I appreciate that we can at least have 1 month off. But I know Three Jokers is around the corner, and there's other projects that have been hinted at or revealed, but I honestly don't think that any of them outside of Three Jokers is anywhere near being solicited. So I imagine Three Jokers, I'm going to predict right now, is going to happen no later than February. It's definitely not happening in December, because if Doomsday Clock, which was not solicited in November, gets its last issue solicited for December, which 11's right around the corner as you're listening to this and as we're recording it, it's coming out this week. So between the beginning of September and sometime in December, I imagine there should be no, well, I hope that there is no reason. I can imagine a situation where it would, but I really hope that there is no reason that they cannot get this final issue of Doomsday Clock wrapped up before the end of 2019, because that makes it over 2 years that it took to get the entire 12-issue series out. So I'm desperately hoping it can wrap up by the end of 2019. I don't think Three Jokers is going to get solicited prior to Doomsday Clock wrapping up. While number 11 kind of hints at some of the stuff that could partake or have something to do with Three Jokers, I don't know that the conclusion of Doomsday Clock is drastically going to affect Three Jokers in any way, but I don't see Jeff Johns' series. Okay, let's just put it this way. Okay, Jeff Johns is on 2 series currently. He's on Doomsday Clock and he's on Shazam. Well, Shazam just got the next 3 issues completely canceled, and they will be resolicited at a future date. Those issues, who knows why they're taking so long. A lot of talk that we've been talking about on the Discord has been that Jeff Johns is just a busy guy and he's not getting the stuff done. While most of the time you can point the blame to the artists, that does not seem to be the case in this situation. Because especially for Shazam, there's no reason why the art wouldn't be able to be done in a normal, fashion, and it's just not. So it has something more to do with than just the art. And while Shazam was a big profile book when it released, I don't think it is as much anymore. Doomsday Clock definitely is, and they're not going to switch artists on Doomsday Clock. Shazam, I feel like if it was an artist situation, they would change artists, because then just to necessitate the point of getting the book out in a timely manner. So pretty sure it's not artists. I'm pretty sure it's Jeff Johns, and if I was DC, I'd be very cautious about soliciting anything in the future with his name on it, including Three Jokers, without it being completed. But at the same time, Jason Fabic has been working on Three Jokers for quite some time. He randomly posts hints on Twitter from Three Jokers, so it's not as if he has not been working on it for a very long time. To be fair, the last thing that he worked on that was part of any sort of normal continuity was, I believe, the Justice League Suicide Squad crossover, which was the first winter of of Rebirth. So that was like 2016, 2017. The guy has not worked on a whole lot of anything other than doing some covers. So that's not to say he couldn't have work elsewhere. As far as, if he's doing concept art for, movies or whatever, it doesn't really make a difference what it is. The guy's probably doing something, but I can't imagine the DC not utilizing his talents if he wasn't currently working on Three Jokers. So there's that.
Do you guys have any insider knowledge on why Batman Beyond doesn't change anything or end or reboot?
The only explanation I can think of is that Dan Jurgens is writing it, and while that, to the normal reader, it's going to be like, well, what does that mean? Dan Jurgens has been with DC Comics for a really, really, really long time. He's going on almost 3 decades he's been with the company, and I imagine if he has a story to tell, they're going to let him tell it, even if it does have poor sales. Because there's no real explanation. I mean, that book should have been canceled a long time ago just based off of sales alone. The only thing I can think of is that they just are letting him tell the story that he wants to tell, and eventually his story will come to an end, and then that'll be the end. I guarantee at this point that we would not see another writer on that book before it gets canceled. I just don't see it. If he can't keep up with the schedule, then that book's gone for sure. He was on Superman for, he was on Action Comics. He was on Action Comics for a while, while Peter Tomasi was over on Superman with Patrick Gleason, and he was doing that. And while there was nothing super remarkable about what he was doing on that title either, it just feels sometimes that certain creators tell their story. Robert Venditti is another guy who seems to just tell his stories, and sometimes nobody's really paying that much attention to what he's doing, but somehow DC just keeps allowing it to keep happening. So probably just one of those, inter-office politics situations.
Because with sales that low, like, maybe they're just thinking, well, it's not doing any harm. It's just paper. I don't know.
We've talked about this before, not recently, but on the Comic Cast over the years, we've talked about this before. Generally, at least to most people who pay attention to comic sales, there's a break point of about 20,000. That's why, when Jessica used to do the numbers, that's what we did. Before that, it was Terry, and now Steph does the numbers. We use 20,000 as our benchmark for a book in danger, and then leading up to, going down to 20,000, it's also, it's one to watch because it's going down. And
it's been under 20,000 since issue 14.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be clear for so those of you who are not paying attention to Batman Beyond is currently on number 35. So it's been almost just under 2 years that it's been under that. So, yeah. The only thing I could think of is that maybe because Dan Jurgens wasn't on the series originally. My only thought is that maybe he had an idea, pitched it. They're like, okay, we'll let you do it. And then because he gets on the book, if he's got a story to tell and he wants to keep doing it, they're just going to keep letting him do it as long as he's got the story. Because that's what happened, because the alternative was to cancel it. To be fair, there's no real explanation. Like we on the site don't consider the book as part of main continuity. I know that there's other sites who don't consider it part of main continuity. For the most part, even though there are elements that it connects to Future's End that happened during the New 52, most of the stuff they really ignore. A lot of the stuff that they still focus on is related to the animated series, which has nothing to do with the comics themselves. So I don't know. Like I said, it just is one of those books where it doesn't have a real explanation of why it still exists. I would love. I
think there's also a chance that someone who's making decisions is just nostalgic for the TV show. They just did the HD restore of that, and that
might be one of the reasons why they kept it around too, is because obviously they knew they were doing the high definition upgrade to the series in advance, so that could be an explanation too. Maybe they kept it up thinking, well, maybe the series will become more popular after the new complete series releases on Blu-ray. When we upload all of the HD version of the episodes to DC Universe, maybe it'll become more popular. They know that the digital upgrade would have been in the works for quite some time, so maybe that's a reason. But at the same time, it's a rough sell. So. Which is funny because actually, while we'll get into it when we get into Greater Gotham, this final issue, it felt like they actually moved the story along after the story was stagnant for about the last 5 issues. So, but yeah. Anyway, so that's the solicitations. Head over to the site if you're interested in more. With that being said, we're going to jump straight over to our comic book reviews. We're going to start off with Batman.
Batman number 77, writer Tom King, artists Mikel Janin and Tony Daniel. The story opens on a Gotham City rooftop where Robin, Damian Wayne, is dodging heat vision blasts from an airborne Gotham Girl. As Gotham Girl closes in for the kill, Robin produces the Wand of Clarion, which causes magical chains to appear, wrapping around Gotham Girl, as Damian makes his escape. In Paris, as a singing Selina Kyle cooks dinner, the injured and unconscious Bruce Wayne opens his eyes. Back in Gotham, a psycho-pirate-controlled Scarecrow and Zsasz, now part of Bane's police force, accost a dog walker on a leash law rules, where they are attacked by Robin, who quickly takes them down, saving the dog walker and his dog. Over in Paris, Bruce sits in silence, and Selina comes nearby, with Bruce uttering, with his head down, that he lost. Thomas Wayne's Batman stands on a gargoyle as Robin appears behind him. Thomas tries to reason with Damian, but is met with a punch to the face as Robin tells Thomas that they aren't actually related, that he isn't Batman, and Robin is here to beat him into the ground. Bruce and Selina sit in a cafe in Paris, with Bruce explaining that he needs to go back to Gotham City. Selina points out that he will be killed, and Bruce responds that it would be a good death, echoing what he said in issue 1 of this run. As Thomas and Robin fight, Thomas points out that the penalty for Robin entering Gotham is the death of Alfred. Flashpoint Batman gets the upper hand, knocking Robin to the ground, then knocking him out. As Bruce and Selina walk through the streets of Paris, Selina protests Bruce's willingness to go off to his death in facing Bane. Bruce tells Selina that he has thought of every scenario and that there is no other way. Selina tells Bruce that he can't see everything, and he still can't see her. Robin wakes in Wayne Manor, injured and bound to a chair, as Flashpoint Batman speaks to Robin about how what to come was not Flashpoint Batman's choice. In the background, a voice pleads, not in front of the boy. Robin cries in horror as he witnesses Bane snapping Alfred's neck in front of him. Thomas comments on how Robin is now their hostage and will serve in Alfred's place to prevent the rest of the Bat family from coming into Gotham. The issue ends with Batman and Catwoman in costume, with Catwoman telling Batman that she knows a way to get revenge and take back Gotham. So, big questions first. Is Alfred really dead?
No.
It would be a big change to the character.
No.
He'd have to do his own laundry.
But Dustin, why?
You didn't say why. You said no. Or you said you think he's really dead.
Implied.
I know it's implied. I'm just messing with... Because I'm worried that I'm just going to go into a Tom King rant like I always do. I'm going to start by saying this, okay? I enjoyed this issue. I thought it was a very good issue. We knew, two of the three of us knew about what was happening in this issue the last time we recorded. So I knew this was coming. And I'll say, like, obviously I ranted about the last issue. I had more to say. I don't actually have a lot to complain about this issue, surprisingly. This issue I enjoyed, and to be clear, the reason why is because I know that Alfred's not dead. The reason why we know he's not dead is because for the last 2.5 issues leading up to this, all we have seen is a bunch of reality-bending situations where characters are acting out of place, seeing things that they're not supposed to be seeing, masking things that they should be seeing, like Ventriloquist in the Batcave, like Joker and Riddler being buddy cops together, Scarecrow and Victor Zsasz, confronting somebody about not having a dog on a leash or whatever it was. There's a lot of things going on that just don't make any sense. So it's not too far-fetched to believe that what we are seeing before our eyes is not actually happening. Because let's be honest, I'm not sure how much of this is happening in the first place. There's a lot of stuff that we've been seeing in the last couple of issues that I've complained about, that I've made it very vocal that I am not liking. But this is not something that I'm at all believing is actually true. So I'm not going to sit here and get super upset about Alfred. To be to be the devil's advocate for a second, if it was true, yes, it would be a huge milestone and change the continuity of Batman, which I've thought about multiple times when reading this. But I don't think this is what he implied would be the big change that he hinted at back in May. And I assume that's still happening, despite the fact that he made those comments prior to the new direction they're taking with him coming off in December and him going to the Batman Catwoman series that's happening in January. I'm pretty sure that's all still happening because, as he has said in subsequent interviews since May, he has said that he is still going to finish telling his story. He's still going to tell the story that he intended to tell. It's just going to be told in this new, this other format that he wasn't initially planning. He's still going to tell it, in the Batman Catwoman series. So I assume whatever is happening to the continuity changing or direction changing situation for the character of Batman is going to happen towards the end of his run, not now. And I doubt it has anything to do with Alfred. So while it was a shocking moment, I immediately saw it and told myself there's nothing to get upset about, because outside the fact that this is comics and deaths happen all the time and people come back from the dead, which I absolutely hate as a horrible plot device that too many people decide to use. And it's not, to be fair, it's not the writers who are choosing to do that most of the time. It's most of the time the publishers who are like, sure, you want to kill somebody? Yes, but you must have a way for them to get back to normal. And because we can't have our characters deviate from the normal marketing method that we have that sells merchandise. So that being said, I don't see Alfred being dead. I see it being as a shocking moment that is supposed to do exactly what Tom King has done multiple times in the past, which is get people talking, get people upset, only for them to have the rug pulled out from underneath them right when they're at the top of their rant. So I'm hoping this is not one of those situations where I'm deciding to give up on ranting and I've already had the rug pulled out from underneath me, because obviously I'm still going to be reading these comics, but I sincerely doubt that he's actually dead. So, yeah.
Do you remember when all the boys are meeting Bruce at Batburger?
Yep.
And they all talk about how they've all come back from the dead, and Duke is freaking out. He's like, I don't want to die. I don't know if that was, because it seemed like it was kind of making fun of that trope. So it would be weird for him to use it unless it was meant to be foreshadowing and making fun of it.
But the difference is, I don't think he's actually dead. That's the thing. It's one thing.
But what's the point of faking it, though? So
if people to talk, that's honestly, think about what Tom King has done during his run. He's done a series of things that make people talk about the series. That's what it is.
But
and half
from
the time,
a story point of view,
he gets a lot of crap for it. But that's because people just don't get it. But yes, go ahead.
Thomas loves Alfred. He has to. Thomas tried to bring his dead wife back, and we still don't really know if she was his universe's Martha or this universe's Martha. For all we know, he is
his universe's Martha because he carries her around on his back all the time.
That's creepy.
Yeah.
And
completely made up there.
And he's messed up, obviously, and he for all we know really does love Bruce and is doing this for his own good, which is really weird. I don't think he'd want to do that to Alfred. I don't know. I know he's literally not the one doing it, it's Bane, but if he's the big brains behind everything and not really Bane, I don't know. I just don't see the point of not really killing Alfred. They have a new hostage now. They have the son of Batman. It's just as good. I don't know.
I would say even if they really kill Alfred, someone on the Discord pointed out that in issue 73 and 74, they set up the Nain pit, the Lazarus pit that requires an exchange. And what better way for Flashpoint Batman to redeem himself than giving his life to restore Alfred back to life, Yeah,
I have no doubt thinking that he'll be back. Yeah, I don't have no doubt Alfred will come back. I was just kind of messing around. I don't think this is the big change. This couldn't be. But I say that. But I I think Lazarus Pit is more likely than this being some kind of psycho pirate delusion. Because I just don't see the point of not really killing Alfred.
I think the Psycho Pirate or
is
Scarecrow delusion would be fine, too.
But see, the thing with the Psycho Pirate thing is that they haven't super explained it. And that's what makes me believe it has to be that. Is because despite the fact that we saw all of 75, Gotham City and the way it is, we didn't really get the explanation of how we got to that point. The fact that we see the villains working with each other, especially like Joker and Riddler, who the last time King wrote them, they were at each other's throats. We've seen these different things happening, and there's no real explanation as to why all this stuff is happening, why things are the way they are, and, why is Gotham Girl running around in a Robin suit? What is her, there's so many questions that are unanswered, but I think the reason why, I think the main possibility for a lot of them is just to explain it as Psycho Pirate. Psycho Pirate showed up briefly in 75. They made a comment about how they were bringing villains to Psycho Pirate so that he could reprogram them or whatever. I don't think it was phrased like that, but that's basically what's happening. So I'm convinced that the reason why they're not going over and above to explain how things happened outside of the wonderful thing that I absolutely hate, which is just you coming up with your own ideas of how things came to be, which is
off Paddle Land.
Yay.
Which is not storytelling. That's not storytelling. Without
the other thing that I wanted to bring up in terms of why I am convinced that this is not going to stick is for every other one of the things that Dustin's pointed out, the wedding and the proposal and even nightmares to some extent, and definitely Heroes in Crisis, Tom King has always made some kind of statement either on Twitter or to some newspaper or comic website. He's been completely silent on this issue. So it is clear that this is not a settled plot point, and we still have a lot of revelations to come about what happened to Alfred.
Yeah. There's no doubt in my mind this is all fake, but it all just comes down to me is that they haven't explained a lot of the stuff having to do with how Gotham got in its current state. Sure, Bane is controlling a lot of different stuff, but we still don't know exactly. I don't know. There's just so many questions about what's going on, how things came to be, that I sincerely hope we're going to get answers for. That eventually when we get answers, it will probably explain how Alfred's not dead and how Psycho Pirate just made Damian see something specific. So, I don't know. Or he could have snapped the neck of somebody else and just Psycho Pirate made somebody else look like Alfred. I don't know. The problem is this, the need for Psycho Pirate in this storyline is the thing that's the most frustrating, because Psycho Pirate's power set is so unrestricted in the sense of you could do what you could say he's doing whatever you want him to do. You could just have him do something and have it all make sense for you however you want. And I don't like that because it's like a giant MacGuffin. And I don't like that that's happening, because while Psycho Pirate has clearly popped up in other Batman stories, there's no question about that. He's not typically a character that's used in Gotham City, in Batman, because his power set is above and beyond the normal power set of characters that Batman's dealing with, in my opinion. So I'm not a huge fan of the fact that he's around in the first place, and when everything gets answered or explained as, oh, well, Psycho Pirate waved his hand and everything was the way Bane wanted it to be, it's just, that cements the poor storytelling even worse, because then it's well, we couldn't tell the story of how how Bane could have infiltrated the government of Gotham City. We're not explaining anything like that. It's just Psycho Pirate waved his hand and everything turned the way Bane wanted it to be, and it's just
something, your rant about Psycho Pirate actually reminds me of something that Tom King has said several times in interviews, which is that Psycho Pirate can see all the multiverses. So I think, I always say I think Skeets is the one who brought Flashpoint Batman, but now that I'm thinking about Psycho Pirate, the fact that he can see the multiverses, maybe Skeets was the mechanism, but I think Psycho Pirate might be the key to how Flashpoint Batman still exists. So I just want to throw that out here before we get to the end of this this arc and find out at 85.
Yeah.
So my next, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say, yeah. I really just the one thing that I'm getting I keep hearing consistently. You've said it, not just here, but you've said it on Discord too, and there's other people who've said on Discord is, oh, Tom King says this in interviews. Tom King says this in interviews. And the thing is, the only place that Tom King does interviews is Word Balloon. And I have nothing against Word Balloon. I just don't have time to listen to like 2-hour long interviews with creators because I don't have 2 hours to dedicate to stuff like that. He does do interviews, and there are a select few people who are able to listen to those interviews, and somehow he's making these explanations as how things fit and how things make sense. And it's like, why isn't DC themselves setting up interviews with more mainstream, just, written or interviews to answer some of these questions, if this is the way he intends it to be, is if he doesn't intend on explaining it in the comics, why doesn't he just give interviews with other places? It's been a long time.
Competent in the way they market and explain a title. I think you've hit on the problem there.
Well, there's a big problem. There's a massive problem. Written interviews on any of the websites, there's hardly any of them, unless it's like announcing a new series. And in most cases, they're talking about something as if it's, like a big secret, because they can't actually let you know anything about what's coming. They're just giving you information that you could basically get from the solicitation. I don't understand the PR currently that is occurring at DC. And I say this fully knowing that we work along.
Have a dedicated person for that. It's like a secondary job description for someone else.
That's not true. They have PR. They have multiple PR
if they
people.
Do,
I work alongside some of these people who send us stuff, including our review copies. I'm not saying they're good at their job. They're not. They've also seen some people who are working, who have, yeah, I know what I'm saying. I'm saying that I work with these people and they provide TBU with review copies, and I'm talking crap about them. Yes, that's absolutely right. Chances of them listening to this podcast, slim to none. And if suddenly our review copies disappear, well, then we'll know they are listening. So, no, I mean, the reality of it is, like, there is PR people over there. There's at least 4 different people that I know of that are currently working there. There's 2 people who recently left or were promoted to some place outside of DC, but like still within Warner Brothers. But there are still at least 4 people who are still working there. And on top of that, DC uses an outside PR company for some other things. Like one of their big focuses recently has been this third-party marketing company they've been using for a lot of the DC Kids, Inc., Zoom, whatever you want to call it, series. And I work with those people actually more frequently than the DC people, because they reach out and they actually want to get feedback about the books, and they want to find out what, if we enjoyed the books and things like that. We've got... Actually, as you're listening to this, there's a contest going on our Discord. If you want to win a copy of the latest DC Inc. book, which is Harley Quinn Breaking Glass, there's a contest where you can win one of those, and those are being provided to us from DC Comics. So, like, there are certain aspects that they focus on and that get a lot of promotion, and then there's certain aspects where they don't. Recently, the review copies, and I say this because it ticks me off, the review copies used to come at lunchtime every Friday. Somehow, since one person left after San Diego, the review copies are coming at 5 o'clock my local time, which is after office hours for me on the website and things like that. So it's frustrating because they have to know that there's people on the East Coast who are not staying in the office on a Friday until 6 p.m. But anyway, enough of that rant. It is frustrating. There's a lot of problems. You tried to get an interview with anybody, it's a big thing. They want to know exactly what you're asking them before you ask them. It used to be a lot easier. It used to be a lot different. It's just a lot of things have become more controlled, especially since they've moved over to the West Coast, and Warner Brothers is constantly looking at them with a microscope. It's become a little difficult. A lot of people who have worked there who were really good at their job have left because they don't like the constant scrutiny that they're under from higher ups. So there's definitely problems, but it's frustrating because Tom King will go do Word Balloon, and it's like he's doing Word Balloon and nobody's saying he can't do it. He's just doing it. It's just like Scott Snyder. He does interviews occasionally where it's not approved by DC, but he'll do it, and you can always tell when they're not doing something that's approved by DC because they'll swear. Because when they're giving interviews that are approved by DC, DC's listening, and DC never wants their writers or artists or whoever who are doing a scheduled publicity, interview, they don't want them swearing. But if you listen to audio interviews where they're just straight swearing all the time, you know it's not approved by DC. And Scott Snyder gave one a couple of years back to a website that I had never heard of before, and I gave it a listen, and I was like, wow, he's swearing a lot. And I realized it's because it was unapproved. And I asked him about it at some point, and he was like, they don't really like when I do interviews, but they can't tell me I can't. And I was like, oh, okay, so that makes sense. But then the problem is, but Scott Snyder's a different level. Tom King's a different level. Brian Michael Bendis, who also does a lot of interviews over at Word Balloon. These guys are on a different level than a lot of the Greater Gotham stuff, which is, the Nightwing book or, Red Hood. Those writers are not they're not top tier writers. They can't just go do whatever they want because they want work. And they're not going to get work if they piss off the people at DC. The top tier writers, on the other hand, they can do whatever they want because they're top tier. So, rant over.
I like all this insight. I think
inside baseball, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we do podcasts, to give information that we have that other people don't, to help the community. So my next question is, I thought that the way Damian was written was really good. Like, a lot of people complain that Batman and Damian and the Bat family in general haven't really interacted a lot, especially since Detective Comics ended. But I thought the way Tom King wrote Damian, as usually, I mean, I think Tom King's a great Damian writer, but here especially, it's a great blend of his strengths. I mean, he's such a good combat person. He takes down these pretty strong villains. I mean, Zaz is pretty scary. He's not A-list, but he's a scary villain. And he takes down Gotham Girl with magic, which is a great callback to issue 34. I thought that was another proof that Tom King is paying attention sometimes. He does make a couple of mistakes, but I thought it was a really well-constructed moment to have him use the Wand of Clarion to trap Gotham Girl. But what did you guys think about the way Damian... Oh, sorry. And the other thing is, you showed the vulnerabilities when he was captured and he's mourning for what he did that caused Alfred's quote-unquote death. I thought that was really well written. How did you feel that Damian was portrayed in this issue?
I think it was fine. I didn't have any issues whatsoever. I actually enjoyed the way Damian was portrayed. I liked how he was still his, kid full of attitude. And they had this, he had this sense of, he had a sense of purpose, which is appreciative because that kid, he's always got purpose. But at the same time, the stuff that he's doing, he's talking crap while he's taking out Gotham Girl. That is Damian. That's who I see as Damian. And we don't always see that. There's people who will make him snarky and stuff, but there's a different version of Damian. There's the snarky Damian where he's just making snarky comments, and then there's the attitude Damian where he's making the comments, but he's also backing it up by showing that, hey, look, I really am a badass. So, and that's what he's doing this issue. He's legitimately showing that despite the fact that he is so small, and so young, he is a force to be reckoned with. And while unfortunately he was unable to take out Thomas, which I didn't see happening in any way. The fact that he didn't back down, that's exactly what Damian is. And I'd love to see more of Damian and the other, because even Tim in the last issue, that was written well too. So, I mean, I wanted to see these characters popping up more often because King can clearly do it. We know that he understands some of these characters because he's written them well when he does write them. It's just a matter of writing them more frequently, I guess, because that's the problem. I understand, and I know that his reasoning behind that is this is a Batman story. And at the time when Batman and Detective launched as part of Rebirth, the intent was, his explanation was, well, Batman is a Batman story. We're focusing on Bruce Wayne. This is a Bruce Wayne story. Detective Comics, at least when it launched during Rebirth, showed a lot of these other characters. There was a lot of characters that were focused, and that was his explanation. As Tynion came off the book and other writers have come on to Detective. Now, of course, Detective is literally just the second Batman book, which is frustrating because we don't need to have a second Batman book when we already have multiple miniseries that revolve around Batman and all this. So all this is to say, I'm all on board King writing Damian. I think he did a great job this issue. I'd like to see more of it. I'd like to see him work with the Bat family more often.
What do you think, Steph?
I really liked it. I think that, yes, we get his snarkiness, we get his good fighting, but, you know, he is facing off against another world's Batman. Like, Batman is still Batman regardless of who he is, and so I don't think... I wasn't surprised to see him being taken down. And the fact that he was showing such, like, vulnerability of strategery in the last issue, I think that kind of made sense that eventually he wouldn't... He's not Batman, you know, doesn't have everything planned out. He wants to be like Batman, but he isn't yet. And so seeing just his vulnerability, like he is still a 13-year-old boy. He's not meant really to have gone through all this. And so seeing his breaking point, it's interesting how it's kind of mirroring Bruce's breaking point. Both father and son kind of reach to finally come to terms with, you know, losing. Like Damian literally has lost the life, was responsible, sort of, for the loss of Alfred's life, and Batman finally wakes up and realizes that he's lost every fight, and he is in Paris. I really appreciated the kind of depth that they took to really study Damian and what he's going through in as little as time as they could.
And I completely agree. I think that Tom King, if you look at Detective Comics 1000, he has like 8 pages of a story, and I think he just nails everyone's voice. They're distinct. Now, let me take that back. I don't like the way he writes Barbara Gordon, but everyone else, but even though I don't like it, she's clearly a distinct person. He's not just writing the same person as everyone else. There's some writers. Even though I do like him, I don't want to bash.
Real quick, I want to jump on that. What is it about his? And I'm not saying I do, but I'm saying, what is the thing you don't like about the way he writes her?
He writes Barbara Gordon, and this was an issue in Heroes in Crisis too. I read a whole piece about it. He writes Barbara Gordon really. To me, it feels like she's kind of a teenager, in a way that she isn't usually. Even if you read Batgirl Year One by Chuck Dixon and Scott Beatty, she's got a maturity and a thoughtfulness to the way she works, and she's always been spunky. But in the way Tom King tends to write Barbara Gordon, she's kind of she's lost some of that thoughtfulness. She's just sort of snarky with an attitude, but she doesn't quite think everything she says through. So her primary character note in Detective Comics 1000 was, I dated Dick Grayson, so I'm ready for anything because Dick Grayson's a disaster, which is a funny joke, but it is not, I think, a particularly... it doesn't match any other iterations of Barbara that I view. I mean, my Barbara Gordon voice is basically a combination of Chuck Dixon's Batgirl Year One and Gail Simone's Oracle. She's just really, really thoughtful, really smart, very spunky. And I think Tom King's Batgirl is much more maybe the animated series, but with sort of a Tom King edge to it. And unlike the way he writes Dick and Damian and Tim and even Steph and Cass and Huntress, I think he has a much better grasp on those characters than Barbara Gordon, at least for me.
But do you think? See, so my thought on that is, and I definitely agree. I think that is exactly how King writes her. But I think that if you don't look at her portrayal previously to or prior to New 52, and you just go off of what Gail Simone did when she was on Batman or Batgirl, you read the stuff that happened with Batgirl Burnside, you read the stuff that's been happening in Rebirth with Batgirls, like the Hope Larson stuff, and then who came on? There was somebody else who came on after them.
Margaret Scott?
Was that she came on right after? I thought there was somebody else in
there was
between.
a couple fill-in issues, but I can't remember who it was.
Okay, but anyway, Margaret Scott, I think the thing is, like, when you look at it, I think the problem is that the character has, like, fluctuated so much,
Yeah,
in
she
the
doesn't
last
have a voice anymore, really.
Exactly. That's the thing. I think that the last 8 years since the character has become Batgirl again in 2011, I think the problem is that there's just no voice there. And you've got these like big stretches where a creator will be on the title for a long time, try to give them, or I know who I was thinking. I was thinking of the Bensons because they had Batgirl and Birds of Prey. In Rebirth, but there was, you get these stretches where, like, Gail Simone was on Batgirl for a long time. Hope Larson was on Batgirl for a long time. You had the Burnside of Batgirl, which had a huge creative team. They were on Batgirl for a long time. You get these big, long stretches of, like, who the character is, but each and every single one of them is like some sort of different version, and it's not some sort of consistent take on the character. And that happens to be the case with some of the other characters we've seen. The one that comes to mind is Nightwing. Nightwing, at least for the longest time now, has had multiple different versions of the character. And not just because he's Rick Grayson now, but because that's what's happened. You get these creators who come on and they try to do their version of the character. And DC lets them, and that's what happens. And I think a lot of that has to do with the editorial overview that isn't happening on a lot of the titles. They're just letting people try, take risks. And there's nothing wrong with necessarily taking a risk, but there is something wrong with the character just kind of falling by the wayside, which is what I feel like is happening with a character like Batgirl, a character like Dick Grayson, in some cases Tim Drake. I think this is what happens to these characters, is that, like, you don't have somebody saying, no, wait a second, you can't do that with this character because that doesn't make any sense, because this character is supposed to be really smart, supposed to be very mature. You can't have them oogling and ogling over some boy just because she's a girl. That doesn't make any sense. This isn't who that character is. So, I mean, like, I'm not saying that Tom King is, Tom King has the clout where he should be able to make her have a voice, but the problem is his version of the voice is too set on somebody from the New 52 forward and not the character prior to that. So that's, I guess, my defense of Tom King, which, hey, go bet on a horse today, because it's probably not going to happen again in the near future.
Well, I think that's a great defense, and I agree completely with you. I think that when there is a character who Tom King has worked on for a long time, and I think it's clear from Grayson and from his work on Batman, that Tom King has read the history of these characters. And the other problem with those characters is Damian and Batman both have been really protected by editorial in a lot of ways, in terms of getting their voice. And I think that you're right that some writers tend to write Damian just as snarky rather than actually competent, as well as having an attitude. But I think every time Tom King has written Damian, he's really caught that balance of, who he is, this assassin child raised who wants to be good, and he's just that dual nature. He's really good. And I think the way he writes Dick is also really good. He's got that kindness, but he's also very dangerous, and but it's hard to see. Like, there's so many layers in the way he writes Dick and the way he writes Bruce, and I think it shows when he doesn't have quite as much of a grasp on the characters he's writing. And I just think that Barbara is one of the ones that he doesn't quite grasp as much.
Do you think, because we one thing I think that we all agree on is that whenever Tom King writes the whole family, like, it's always very good. Even if there's a couple of quibbles here and there, all in all, it's very well received. Do you think he could do more of that? Like, do you think he's so good because it's so concentrated and he only has to do it for short spurts? Or do you think that if this had been a Bat Family book, it kind of would have either been watered down or kind of fallen flat?
Well, if you look at the other series that Tom King has done, he works with a very contracted cast. The biggest cast he's ever worked with was Omega Men, and I think that still only has like 5 or 6 characters. If he used the whole Bat Family the way he's used it in, I think, like 71 or in Detective Comics 1000, I do think it would be kind of diluted, because James Tynion is the only person I've ever seen to do a Bat Family cast as big as he used and still keep arcs for every single character. And some of the characters still had really small arcs. Tom King is he's a very 1 to 2 character focused writer, and I think that he's best using the Bat Family as a seasoning rather than as the main dish. And I just wish he kind of used that seasoning a bit more. And I think we're going to get that in Citibank because he's promised that the Bat Family will come back in like 81 or something. But yeah, I think your instinct is dead on about how he uses them well because he really focuses when they show up. I think that if he used them all the time, it wouldn't always be quite as solid.
Do you have any more questions?
Let me see. Oh, yes, I do. This is kind of a regular question. I really loved seeing the Selena and Bruce parts. They were beautifully drawn by Tony Daniel. A lot of detail, a lot of rich colors by Tomu More. You could really feel just Catwoman's personality. She's trying to play things up as she's trying to keep hopeful because it's a very dark situation for her and Bruce. But then when she gets serious and she says, "You still don't see me," and then she has a plan, I thought that was really exciting, and I'm really excited for the next couple issues, which are interludes focusing on Batman and Catwoman. So how do you think that the Bruce and Selena section of this issue went for you?
I think it went fine. I mean, like, I don't feel like it really progressed a whole lot. I mean, Bruce moped around a lot, and Selena picked him back up, and then they said they're heading to Gotham. So, I mean, like, I'm looking forward to 77, which conveniently was delayed a week, so we did not actually see it before we were recording this. But I'm interested to see what's happening. I don't know that Tony Daniel's art convinced me to be more interested by any means. I think his art was good. The art we have gotten has been good, but as I recently went on a rant on Discord, Tony Daniels seemed to be promised for a lot of the art, and the last couple of issues there hasn't been a lot of Tony Daniel, and now he's not going to be on the series going forward, because this month we have Clay Mann for 2 issues, and then we have 2 issues of John Romita Jr., and then there's 2 issues of Mikel Janin. So, and Ian actually explained why things could have, changed, and it made sense once he explained it. But it's still slightly frustrating because I think that Tony Daniel's a really great artist, and I'd love to see more of his art. 50 was like really cool with a lot of the stuff that he was showing. It's just, unfortunately, every time it's not just him. And I don't say this, I'm not trying to pick on Tony Daniel by any means. There's a lot of times recently that we get artists who are announced for something. They're going to be on the issue for an extended arc, and then what happens? They're not. And it's not anything necessarily against the artists themselves, because as Ian pointed out to me on Discord, the original plan was for an arc from 75 to go forward to like 85 or whatever. And then that changed to wrapping up by 83, and then Tom King going off to do Batman Catwoman. And that could have changed why Tony Daniel's not doing it, because he had to rework stuff. And that's why Mitch Gerard filled in for some pages on number 50. And obviously this issue was split between was it Janin on this issue? Or Jorge Fornes?
Yeah, it was Mikel Janin.
Okay, yeah. Janine was on this issue with Tony Daniel, and Tony Daniel only had like 8 pages out of this issue. So, I mean, like, I get that stuff could have changed. It's one of those things where, like, I don't think I was ever on the idea of, yes, I can't wait till these books go monthly, because I've enjoyed the fact that every 2 weeks we're getting a new chapter of the story instead of waiting an entire month. And I think I've gotten a little too accustomed to that. And I think for a long time I was like, I don't want this to happen. I'm not looking forward to January when all the books go back to monthly. Now, that's not to say that there won't be other books that will tell the story. Obviously, Batman will still be happening. Batman Catwoman will still have Detective Comics. I'm sure there will be some other book that will take the spot of the other issue of Detective Comics. But they're not all going to be telling the same story. They're going to be telling their own stories. And still waiting a month in between stuff it can be frustrating, especially for those of us who were spoiled for the last couple of years where we had double shipping. But the one thing I am definitely not upset about missing out on when it comes to the bi-monthly schedule is the artist situation. There has been so many problems with the double shipping when it comes to the artists. You get these big names like David Finch or Tony Daniel, and they're attached to these titles, and they can't keep up on a normal rate of one issue per month, or if they can, it's only for a short time, and then they have to have a fill-in here or there. But when you put them on a series that's releasing 2 issues per month, you're lucky if you get 3-4 issues out of them before you have to take a break. And it doesn't matter how far in advance they work. And in the case of Tom King, we know that he's had situations where he's rewritten scripts and changed things, or plans have changed, and that obviously takes a toll on the art too, because if things have to change to reflect the overall change of things, because plans change or whatever. I feel like I said change 15 times there. I think that I can't wait for monthly issues for one thing, and that's to have a consistent artist on an arc. Obviously, there's issues that are releasing now, or series that are releasing right now that have a set artist that is on them for a significant number of issues. And while I understand that there are certain artists that can't even maintain a monthly schedule, it's very frustrating when you get somebody like Tony Daniel on, you see his amazing art, you're like, oh man, this stuff is so good, and then he's not on a full issue, or he's not on for more than one full issue. It's really frustrating, because it's like, I thought I was getting more of Tony Daniel, not Tony Daniel and then 8 pages of Mitch Strart. Or I thought I was getting more Tony Daniel, not 8 pages of Tony Daniel and the other 16 pages of Mikel Janin. And there's nothing to, I'm not trying to speak badly of the other artists. It's just, it's not what you're expecting. And that's the part that is really frustrating about this double shipping schedule that they've had, is these situations with the art. And it's not to say that the artists aren't trying their hardest to do what they're doing. It's just, as a reader, I don't like the jarring difference between art that we consistently have been seeing. So
I 100%
there's that
agree.
plus.
And I think that if DC was really serious about trying to increase sales, they would have a Year of the Artist initiative rather than a Year of the Villain, and say in January 2020, we will put an artist on a book, and they will not come off that book until December 2020. I'm actually really not kidding. I think that would do more to increase and hold their sales than anything else they could do. But they're not going to do it, because they unfortunately are not. They don't have the editorial set up to fix that. I actually think, even though Tom King and Clay Mann are working on Batcat right now, and that's launching in 5 months, I think we're going to see fill-in on that series hitting around issue 5 or 6, unfortunately.
Oh, man. And I'm not going to say it's not possible, because that happened with Heroes in Crisis. There was 2 fill-ins for the 9 issues. And even though it was originally 7 issues, they extended it. Clayman still only did 7 issues, but they still had 2 issues they plugged in to fill in so that there was space. And
even with the issues that weren't the added issues, you had Jorge Fornes and who's Travis Moore. They did fill in pages on those issues too. So that's why it is Heroes in Crisis that makes me think that we're going to have fill-in issues on Batcat. And I hate to say that, because I love the way Clayman draws Batman and Catwoman. I think he's one of the best artists of that particular pairing.
Yeah. So, all right. So Batman, I'm going to give a total of. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5.
I think I was thinking 4 as well. It's a lower 4, but a 4.
I'm giving it definitely a 4 out of 5. I gotta say that Alfred's death, even if it is fake, it did hit me hard. So I was pretty shaken up after reading it. But it was a well done issue, and I think it's really, really good. So definitely 4 out of 5, which I think is 4 out of 5.
Yeah, and then over on the site, Paul gave it 4, so it's going to give 4 out of 5 across the board. Moving on to our next book, Detective Comics. Detective Comics number 1010, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Christian Duche. We return to the nondescript island in the Pacific where two aged and unkempt men muse about the crashing plane that they witnessed. Far from the wreckage, they stumble across an injured and unconscious Bruce Wayne. Working together, they lift him up and move him to safer grounds. Back at the wreckage, we find Deadshot and his captives. In a display of skill, Deadshot shoots a stray rattlesnake before it can strike one of the captives. One of his hostages lashes out at Deadshot, where he reveals he was paid to kidnap him. Can't be blamed for Mother Nature lashing out against them. This woman proclaims her dismay, stating that she isn't afraid of Deadshot. With a shot just inches away from her face, Deadshot demonstrates why they should fear him and why he is in charge. While it looks like our captives will comply, nature seems to have different plans. A Black Panther strikes as a full moon illuminates the chaos. With ferocity, the Panther mauls Deadshot, drawing blood. After a struggle, Deadshot breaks free and shoots the beast. Wounded, the Panther retreats. Next, we cut to a now-conscious Bruce sitting with the two gentlemen that saved him, Hiroshi and Clarence. Thanks to a medicinal combination of jungle berries and bark, Bruce is upright by the fire. He learns that these two men had fought each other in World War II and have been marooned here ever since, completely isolated from society. They talk about the outcome of the war and about the results of the World Series over the years. Bruce repays their kindness with his knowledge, listening to their story about the dogfight that led to the arrival on the island. As they speak, Tanaka, the Black Panther from the prior scene, arrives, wounded from the battle before. Hiroshi tends to Tanaka as he does for many animals on the island. The two men are concerned about how this could have happened, but Bruce knows exactly who caused this. He states that he needs to borrow some equipment, standing triumphantly. We cut back to Deadshot and his prisoners who refuse to talk to him. Deciding to catch some dinner, Deadshot shoots what he believes to be a monkey. As he walks out to find his prey, he finds a different beast entirely. Standing on a tilted branch is Bruce, donning a dark costume that resembles a black overcoat with goggles and a familiar-looking cowl. A fight ensues, and Bruce gets struck by a falling tree, a tree Deadshot specifically shot to incapacitate Bruce. As he tries to rise, Bruce sees the captives calling out for liberation. A sense of justice takes over Bruce as he darts towards them. We end with Deadshot locking his aim upon Bruce and stating that the prisoners were only the bait. Lastly, we see a 2-page sequence of Mr. Freeze with his wife, partially thawed. He kisses her forehead and holds her hand as he reluctantly allows the glass to encase her once more. His faith will not be deterred. Okay, where do I begin? So, it's not a secret on this podcast that I enjoy monkey films, and there is a specific movie that released last year called Kong Skull Island, and part of the plot of that movie was that there was two soldiers in World War II. One was one was from America, and one was from Japan, and they fought each other. Their planes crash landed on a beach. They fought each other. King Kong rose. They ended up working with each other and decided not to fight. One of them ends up dying. Eventually, in the future, a group of people come to the island in search of King Kong and come across this American soldier, this American vet, and he's aged, obviously. And in the process of that all happening, he asks about baseball, of all things, explains the story about how he and this other man lived in peace despite the fact that they were mortal enemies because of the war. And that was a small plot point within the movie Kong Skull Island. Now, I can't be the only person who watched Skull Island because that movie made almost $500 million. So there has to be at least some other people who have seen this movie. Maybe one of those people is Peter Tomasi. I don't know. I can only imagine. Now, here's the thing. I know that Peter Tomasi has done other things related to American history, and this is him pulling that part of what he enjoys into the story. But it's way, way, way too similar to that little plot point that was in Kong Skull Island, which maybe he didn't see. I don't know. But I'm going to assume he probably did. And I feel like maybe this was a little too closely resembled to that. And what makes it even weirder is the fact that keep in mind, Kong Skull Island took place in the 70s, the early 70s. This is taking place in present time, which means any person who is on that island, who's from World War II, has to be clear up into their upper 90s at this point, which is slightly ridiculous. To potentially believe that two men have survived almost 70 years on an island by themselves, ridiculous. I'm sorry, it's just ridiculous. I had a huge problem with this issue, if you couldn't tell from my intro here. This was not very good. While I'm really questioning what exactly the point of all of this was, because let's be honest here. Okay, so you've got this plot point. We'll throw that aside. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. I've talked about it. I said my piece. I don't like that he stole from Kong Skull Island. We'll leave that alone. The part that I really don't understand is Deadshot makes a point to say that he's there for one specific CEO and he's there to kidnap, not kill. He's there to kidnap this one CEO. He cannot be, it's not his fault that Mother Nature struck the airplane with lightning. I think on the last episode I brought up how likely is this, and it turns out there was some research done by some people on the Discord, and it turns out you can get a plane gets struck by lightning all the time, and they don't get torn apart, and they don't crash down to the middle of the Pacific Ocean and conveniently land on islands. That doesn't happen. So this entire ridiculous idea of a plane getting struck by lightning, being torn apart, and it crashing into an island is just so ridiculous. And I say this fully knowing that I have supported Peter Tomasi in the past and have said on and on about how I enjoy his stuff. But this story, I don't know what the point of it is. Anyway, Deadshot says he's going for the specific CEO. Then he later comments when Bruce appears in this makeshift bat costume that he somehow needed to create, despite the fact that if the whole point was to kidnap a CEO to draw Batman out, how would Batman be drawn out on this island, of all places? It wouldn't happen. So why would he be drawing... Why would the hostages be bait for someone who looks like Batman? And if it's not Batman, we know that Deadshot doesn't know who Bruce Wayne is. Bruce putting on this outfit and fighting him, what? Eventually he gets caught. It's not like he's got all of the deterrence that he has on his normal bat suit. He gets found out. Now Deadshot knows that Bruce Wayne dresses up like somebody who looks like Batman and decides to try to take on Deadshot. Come on. What is going on? Please, somebody else, tell me if you had the same thoughts, or I guess the complete opposite thoughts.
Well, okay, so I've mentioned on the podcast before, I went to school for mechanical engineering. I know how things work, right? And when I was done thinking for the day, I would sit and I would watch Speed. And my future husband would say, "Why are you watching this movie? This is literally the stupidest movie that's ever been. Nothing in this movie makes sense. It's all wrong." And I'd be like, "It doesn't matter. I love this movie. This is what I enjoy." No. That being said, I enjoyed this issue. I didn't know about the Kong Island. That would have bothered me a whole lot more if I had known that. But I really liked those two guys and their story. So I did not know that was stolen. But I still liked it. And yeah, sure. Maybe he knows it's Bruce Wayne. He doesn't think it's Batman. I don't know. Because he says the hostages are bait. Of course it doesn't make sense that Batman is there. I don't know. I didn't catch that he was there to get Batman.
Well, it might not be Batman. It could just be... It's just... it's not that it's Batman, because it's very unlikely that it is Batman, despite, of course, that the cover, of course, is reflecting that Batman is on the island with... Well, not on an island, but Deadshot has Batman in his crosshairs, which... Whatever. But the thing is, it's not so much about the fact that he's after Batman. It's that who is he holding the hostages...
to bait.
as bait for? I don't understand who... Like, on this island, he's holding them hostage with the intent that someone is going to come for them. But who is coming for them that he is going after? Like, if it was somebody who's coming to, like, save the hostages, that makes sense. But it's not going to be a specific person who he's going to want to kill or try to get. That part doesn't make any sense. It's not like... The only way for him to get a Coast Guard soldier, or I'm sorry, I don't know their specific guardsmen, maybe is what they're called, the Coast Guard who might come save them from the island, or a SEAL Team 6. Deadshot's not going after one of them. There's a reason he's going after somebody specific. So the question is, who is he going after that these people are the bait for? It's not this random person who shows up wearing a bunch of old gear that's coming after Deadshot. So why does he make that comment? It doesn't. There's so many problems.
It doesn't, but I'm willing to put on my speed glasses and just enjoy this for the dumpster fire that it is. I enjoy a good dumpster fire. Like, I don't know. I just had a good time with it. I just, you lower your expectations, you lower your standards.
It's so sad.
It's a great show.
I don't want to do that.
But you're paying $4 a pop for these lowered expectations.
That's true. All right.
It's not like a movie. If you're like renting it off Amazon, it's like $4 for 2 hours. This is like $4 for like 10 minutes of entertainment. I expect a little more. I don't have nearly as much intense plot analysis as Dustin. I looked at this issue and I didn't have fun, just because the last issue had Bruce Wayne pretending to be a playboy and had Lucius Fox, and it was Bruce, secretly trying to.
It felt like it was going somewhere.
I did not expect it to go this direction.
This issue was mostly just people sitting around fires being kind of like meh when a cat attacks. I was just like, what is that? So,
it did have it. Yeah, that's true. The Black Panther got extra points from me because it's a kitty who attacked Deadshot.
It's the DC Marvel crossover we've all been waiting for.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to and I don't want to beat a dead horse because let's be honest, this horse is way dead for me. But it's just, I don't know. To be fair, I didn't give it the last issue an amazing rating. I gave it a 3, which is pretty average. But I felt like it was going somewhere. This doesn't go anywhere. And the fact that we have yet another issue before we get to the next storyline is insane to me. This could have easily been a 2-issue story arc, not a 3-issue, or I think it's only 3 issues, but I don't know why it needed to be as long as it is. It's just too long. And the worst part about this is the one interesting thing about this issue. And I'll say, while that idea of the 2 soldiers on the island, I don't have a problem with it. And if I never watched Kong Skull Island, I actually would have enjoyed it because I like watching stuff about World War II and the history of that stuff. So I would have enjoyed that. I of course immediately made the connection to a movie that I've seen multiple times and I talk about all the time. So it's not one of those things I can ignore. But one of the best things about the issue is these constant hints that the stuff with Mr. Freeze is coming. Of course, I was like, I can't wait till she gets unthawed. And then, of course, I wrote up the solicitation breakdown for November and saw the covers, which is basically I don't know if this is what happens because I don't read through every single solicitation to find out exactly. But based off the covers that are coming in November, it looks like Nora gets out of the ice, turns on Freeze, and becomes a villain herself. And I'm not looking forward to that at all.
Well, the covers have lied this entire time.
That's true.
Though.
That's true. I'll give you that. But the one catch of the covers is that the Acetate cover, which is a higher end cover, which has all kinds of weird things that could easily be lied. The same weird. I got the side shave. I'm the new the new punk villain. Girl that you've never seen before. That shows on that Acetate cover, and then the next cover. She's like that again. So it's I can't, I don't know. I really want to get to the Mr. Freeze stuff because I really despise the fact that now we've gotten 2 issues where we've got this frozen, thawed, this one's thawing logo. And what are we getting out of it? We're not getting anything related to Mr. Freeze other than a couple pages at the end of the issue. So I want to get there, especially with this dumpster fire, which is clearly the reason why the logo's the thawing is because this issue is a complete garbage fire. But I want to get to the Mr. Freeze stuff, but now I'm super concerned about that because what is the necessity for Nora to just go straight evil? I'm waiting for all the offers, dark gifts, all that stuff that Lex Luthor handed out to, like, be twisted and become, like, some sort of, like, oh, you thought you were getting this? No, you actually got this. And then all the villains are super pissed. And that's how this whole story wraps up, is all the villains that got something horrible from Lex Luthor that, is a super huge threat, they're all just slightly twisted versions, and those villains end up having to team up with the heroes because they're pissed about what Lex Luthor did. Because I just see it going that way. So, yeah. Hopefully, so we started with a small garbage fire. We moved to a dumpster fire. Next time we'll have the garbage dump fire. So I'm going to give this 1.5 out of 5.
Aww. I'll give it a 2. A 2.
Wow, you guys... I'm giving it a 2.5, which I thought was average, but wow. I never thought I'd be the highest rating on this one.
Like I said, make your bets on those racehorses. Ian just outrated me on Peter Tomasi, so hell is starting to freeze over. All right, so over on the site,
we'll finally win the Super Bowl.
Jamie gave the issue a total of 2.5, so it's going to give Detective Comics 2 out of 5 Batarangs. That is all of our in-depth reviews. Let's over to the site for Greater Gotham. Starting off with August 21st, we have main TBU books. We already talked about Batman number 77, Nightwing number 63. Rick gets some unwanted advances by a villain. This was reviewed by H. Ham. He gave it 4.5 out of 5. Year of the Villain, Black Mask number 1. Luthor gives Black Mask a new face and a new purpose. This reviewed by Tony. He gave it 4 out of 5. Secondary TBU books, Batman number 232, Facsimile edition. Dick Grayson is kidnapped, and Batman must join forces with the mysterious Ra's al Ghul to save him. Can Bruce trust this stranger? This is by H. Ham. He gave it 4 out of 5. Main DC Universe books, Teen Titans number 33. Lex Luthor plans for Lobo are far from over, as the main man soon finds out. Meanwhile, Damian and Amico discuss their possibility of a traitor amongst the ranks, and a dark new secret is revealed. So by Donovan, he gave it 3.5 out of 5. Secondary DC Universe books, we have Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, where while briefly shown, Jimmy Olsen is currently set up in Gotham City. Moving over to August 28th, we have main TBU books, Batgirl number 38. Batgirl recovers from her last battle with Killer Moth and prepares for the next thing as the Oracle entity looms in the background. This is by Paul. He gave it 3.5 out of 5. Batman Superman number 1. Batman and Superman team up to rescue a kidnapped boy. This is by Tony. He gave it 3.5 out of 5. We already talked about Detective Comics, Red Hood Outlaw number 37. Jason opens his school for the gifted and opens a new chapter in his life. This is by H. Ham. He gave it 4 out of 5. Secondary TBU books, Batman Beyond number 35. The Split's motivations are revealed. Falseface makes a deal, and Batman's secrets become compromised. This is by Donald. He gave it 3 out of 5. Batman Curse of the White Knight number 2. Azrael unleashes the fire and fury of his mission on Batman. Ian reviewed this and gave it 3.5 out of 5. Main DC Universe books, Justice League number 30. In their efforts to thwart Doom, the Justice League expands its reach to both the past and the future. What could go wrong? Andy gave this 3.5 out of 5. Secondary DC Universe books, Justice League Dark number 14. Man-Bat continues to be a part of the main team. The Terrifics number 19. Bat-Zarro makes a brief cameo in the issue. Finally, trades in hardcovers from the past 2 weeks include Batman Kings of Feared hardcover, Grayson the Super Spy Omnibus new edition hardcover, Tales of Batman Jerry Conway Volume 3 hardcover, The Batman Who Laughs hardcover as well. And despite what DC has on their website, there is actually the Brave and the Bold Bronze Age Omnibus Volume 3. That was on DC's site as it came out, but it was canceled, and DC unfortunately hasn't been updating their website to reflect these changes. So there's that for you. if you heard me give a rating that someone on the site reviewed the comics, be sure to head over on the website. We have reviews for all those books. Every Wednesday, you'll get all the Batman-specific books. On Thursdays, you'll get all of the Greater Gotham stuff, so all the allies and villains within the Batman universe. And then on Friday, you have all the DC Universe books as well. So be sure to check all those out over on the site. In addition to that, there's actually 2 other editorials that have posted in the past 2 weeks. There's another Batman Through the Years, which focuses on 1944. And then there was also a TBU Collected, which focuses on Batman Death of the Family Saga, which actually was supposed to release back in April. Unfortunately, was canceled, didn't tell anybody, and then was rescheduled for August, and then it also was canceled, and nobody said anything. So, see a recurring pattern here? Yeah, so do I. So, last couple weeks, what did you guys like? What did you guys enjoy the most? Steph, go ahead.
There was actually quite a lot of good stuff. Like Batgirl is interesting. The Terrible Trio is still terrible. But, I'd say Teen Titans, I think, was my favorite because that really kind of opened a door for, like, philosophical discussions of right and wrong and, like, what is okay to do and what's not okay and what is free will and what is society without free will and what is crime without... And it was... I thought it was very interesting, and it shows like Batman. It seemed to show a weaker point of Damian and the things that he struggles in, which is human beings and human interactions and how to keep friends and that kind of stuff. So I thought it was very, very interesting and well written.
I wanted to highlight not the whole issue because I'm still not a fan of the run, but Jorge Jimenez drawing Justice League, and he drew the Justice Society of America in Justice League number 30, and I'm a big fan of Green Lantern Alan Scott and Wildcat Ted Grant, and we got to see both of them, and they looked so cool, and I'm very excited for what they're going to do in the next, this big finale to the Do More storyline. I don't really care about the rest of it, but I really like those 2 characters and the Justice Society in general, and I think that's a really cool thing that Scott Snyder and Jimenez and Tynan are doing for this storyline. Oh, and of course, White Knight, Curse of the White Knights, really good. Definitely check that out.
Yes, so for the last couple weeks, I have to agree with Steph, there was a lot of really good stuff. Some was just slightly above average, and then there was some stuff that I really, really enjoyed. One of the ones that I really enjoyed was Red Hood Outlaw, because it seems like they're going to take Jason in a new direction. But I say this fully knowing that Scott Lobdell has been on this book the entire time, and he has done this like 3 or 4 times since Rebirth started, where he suddenly makes Jason, like, there's a fork in the road, he veers off the road and goes in a completely opposite direction, and you're like, wait, what about the fork? And it doesn't matter because what's off the road is way more interesting than what was previously on the road. So, like, that's happened multiple times. Like, we had him, he left Gotham, he was going out, and you had him dealing with the stuff in the, Middle America, where he went to that town and there was, all kinds of stuff. Before that, there was a situation where, like, he was finding out about his dad, and, like, while that turned and we went in a different direction, then we went to Middle America, and then he turned and he went back to Gotham, and he took over the Iceberg Lounge, and just when you thought, okay, this you thought that was going to be interesting, wait, he's gotten out of school for gifted, and his name's not Charles Xavier. So, I mean, I don't know how
it's like listening to a very, very interesting storyteller who also has ADHD.
Yes, like it honestly feels like he comes up with like these new concepts halfway through the story and is like, I gotta tell the story. And like the previous story just gets wrapped up so quickly, you're just like, what happened? So like the issue where it wraps up, you're like, wow, this stuff got wrapped up really quickly. Why did this happen? But then you get the next issue, you're like, oh, okay, I don't care about what happened. I will care about what's going to happen. It's so weird. It really is. Like, I'm saying this in a good thing. I enjoyed this. I think it's really interesting because it reminded me a lot of Red Hood and the Outlaws from like the New 52, and I know part of that has to do with the fact that Kenneth Rocafort was on art, and he did a lot of the art in the New 52 for Red Hood. But it like the scratchiness, the introduction of all these new not villains, but these new characters, like it was just like interesting. Like I don't know where it's going. I really don't care where it's going. It's just it's interesting. I want to see what happens. And this book, I feel like this book has reinvented itself so many times. Like, it should get an award just because it's reinvented itself so many times.
Without changing, like...
anything.
The creative characters,
yeah.
The creative writers.
It's so weird. But yeah, I definitely check out Red Hood, especially if, I mean, like, to be fair, the last storyline was a good storyline. It just ended on, in my opinion, a very quick, unsubstantiated note, and now it's really interesting. Again, I don't know how this keeps happening, but yes, check out Red.
And Artemis and Bizarro are coming back.
Eventually.
Eventually.
I want to say this. I mentioned this earlier on the Discord, but I have to bring this up. I don't read the Terrifics, but the Terrifics, there was an issue of the Terrifics that came out that had Bizarro in it, so I kind of like just paged through it. And Bizarro is present in the Terrifics. And what's really odd about it is that Bizarro is presented with an offer from Lex Luthor in the book. And, like, you see a lot of Bizarro, the Bizarro world, you know, the universe where Bizarro's from, and a lot of the other characters that are Bizarro characters, like Bat-Zarro, and a lot of other ones. Like, there's a big focus on Mr. Terrible, which is the Bizarro equivalent of Mr. Terrific. And I thought it was so weird. I was like, wait, I thought Bizarro is stuck in this other, like, pocket dimension right now over in Red Hood. Clearly, somebody didn't get the memo, but we'll see. But yeah, had to mention that. But yes. So anyway, that's Greater Gotham. All right, moving on. Before we move on to our listener Q&As, I quickly want to thank our Patreon supporters. Thank you to Robert, Donald, Brendan, Ian, Austin, Stanton's Grave, Arturo, Irwin, Captain America, Jay Dutton, and Real No Deuces. We greatly appreciate all of your support at the $10 and $20 levels, as well as all of you who are supporting at the $3 tier and the no reward tiers as well. We greatly appreciate all of your support. I do want to apologize. Of course, I say this what seems to be every other month. We have a number of things that we have talked about doing, and we just haven't been able to get done. But I always keep track of what we have to provide to you guys as far as our content, our extra content, and I try to make sure that we have that stuff to go through. So we have some stuff that we're going to be doing in the coming month. It's been a busy month for me, so trying to get some of that stuff out has just been a little difficult, but we will be getting to as usual. And as I've said multiple times in the past, if you haven't joined our Discord, please make sure you do so, because as a Patreon supporter, you get extra entries into our weekly, or I should say, our twice per month giveaways that we have over on Discord. Like I said earlier, currently the current one is for a copy of Harley Quinn Breaking Glass, which was sponsored by DC. We have 2 issues of that we're actually giving away. So if you're interested in getting one of those, join the Discord. If you're a Patreon supporter, you get an extra entry. If you're not a Patreon supporter, you're just a listener, go ahead and join. And even if you don't want to talk with the staff and other Bat fans in general, you can just, give yourself an entry into the podcast just by being a member of our Discord. So with that being said, we're going to move into our listener Q&As.
Boy, did you get a wrong number. Leave your message at the sound of the shriek. No, please, don't.
We have one from Mattman via Discord, and he says,
if Batman/Bruce were to actually ever be killed off for good, who do you think should have the honor of doing it? Or do you think he should die of old age or something not relating to crime fighting? Also, did you hear that Alterna Comics is starting its own distribution company to go against Diamond? What do you guys think about that? Would DC or Marvel go for it?
So, to answer your first question, I am going to steal an idea that Ian said on the Discord, which it's not really stealing, but it's a very legitimate answer, which is the annual number 2 that Tom King wrote. Mm-hmm. That is really, honestly, a really good way for it to kind of work its way out. Batman has a family, he's married, he dies of old age. I'm content with that being it. I don't really think that I don't think there should ever be a villain who takes Batman out, because then you're setting that villain above everybody else. And I don't think that's necessary. I think that while there are obviously villains that people will attribute more so as more popular or a bigger threat than others, I think it's all conjecture when it comes down to it. So I think that ultimately the best story for Batman and / Bruce Wayne is that he is, he has a substantial life. He actually maybe turns around Gotham and we don't have all these villains, and he dies a happy life as an old man. That's the way I'd like to see it go out.
It would be interesting. Not saying this is what I would like, but it would be interesting. You remember in the Into the Spider-Verse, Peter Parker just kind of cacked it in the first 5 minutes of the movie. And then, Morales takes over. It would be interesting to see a Batman dies like just horribly boring early on, and what happens because of that. Like, does anyone fill in the shoes? Do they just let Batman be gone? I know that storyline's been done before, but I think that would be a little more interesting than just him dying of old age. I feel like that's what he deserves. Obviously, that issue is just wonderful. That's how it should happen. But I think it would be a little more interesting if it was something else. But I don't know who would kill him. Your pick, I guess, from whatever happened to the Crusade.
I'm interested that no one has been saying what I expected, which is, the Joker should kill him, or Ra's al Ghul should kill him.
No, that's dumb.
I think that if I'm not going to go with the annual number 2, I would prefer Batman to go out saving people rather than fighting a villain. So I wasn't a huge fan of starting Tom King's Batman run with Bruce riding the plane, but honestly, that's not the worst way to go. I mean, he's saving hundreds and hundreds of people by himself single-handedly. That would be a pretty cool way to go. I just don't really like the idea of Batman losing to a villain, because the whole point of Batman is he fights. He fights to save people, and fighting a villain, it doesn't do what I think a good Batman story should do.
All right, so the second question, I can honestly say I'd never had heard of Alterna Comics before you mentioned it in your question. And then I went looking for it, and I found out that the company does, in fact, printer and publish and distribute their own comics. And interestingly enough, they one of their main pushing points for their company is that they're trying to make comics more affordable. Their comics are about $1.50. Some of them are $1.99, but I couldn't find anything that was more than $1.99, at least as part of the all age and the normal young adult type issues. That being said, would DC or Marvel ever go for this? I think the problem is that they're too cemented in this idea that they have to do it this way because that's the way it goes. There's benefits they get from having an outside distributor outside of them doing it themselves, which is obviously they have a lot less risk when it comes to it. When they ship the comics to comic shops, if there's issues, they have to deal with Diamond. They don't deal with DC. While they might go to DC and complain, or might go to Marvel and complain about how the books aren't selling well because the books aren't popular, that's a whole different story. But there's this whole middleman that, keeps the companies who are producing the content away from the people who are selling the content. And while they still interact with each other, I almost feel like there has to be a company in between. I don't like what Diamond does. I don't like that they have a monopoly on this distribution method, but I don't know. The problem is there's no other company who's going to come on board this point in time and say, we're going to make comics. We're going to distribute comics, and we're going to try to compete with Diamond. Diamond is a massive, massive company. And nobody can, unless somebody has just a boatload of money and really wants to give Diamond a run for their money, I don't see how it would ever work. Because the problem is, we all have to admit the comics industry is either going to go full digital at some point, or it's going to crash. And that's what's going to happen. I mean, that's literally the only future that's possible, is that it goes all digital, or that there's no more comics market. You know, publishers, shut down shop because they just can't maintain, because either they don't switch over to digital or whatever. But the thing is, like, it just comes down to the wave of the future is to get further and further away from paper. And it's not because it's paper, it's because you look at newspapers. There's newspapers shutting down all over the place. There's magazines. Entertainment Weekly, which has been running weekly for decades, just announced that they're turning into monthly, but they're staying Entertainment Weekly because that's the name of that they have registered as a trademark. So you're going to get a monthly book that says weekly because they can no longer produce it. Mad Magazine just was announced that they're going to only be reprinting, or they're only going to be distributing reprints going forward. They're not going to be creating new content. The problem is, magazines as a whole are not selling well. So I cannot see a company going out there and trying to compete with Diamond. And ultimately, Diamond is going to be a part of the problem as to why the comics market ultimately crashes. And it's also part of the reason why digital is not a bigger focus. I mean, they made this massive push for digital in 2011 with the New 52, had all kinds of exclusive stuff that was digital first. Now, while there's a couple of them, because I believe the Ruby and the Genlock series are going to be digital first, and there's still Teen Titans Go, and there's a DC Superhero Girls one. That's it. There's nothing. Like, there used to be a Batman one. There used to be a Wonder Woman one. There used to be DC Comics Bombshells. There's been a bunch of titles that were digital first, but there's like nothing anymore that they really focus on, other than the stuff that's not mainstream, DC Universe superhero stuff, or it's all ages. There's only like a couple exceptions. So the thing is, like, digital is not as big of a focus as it is, and I know a lot of that has to do with the fact that the retailers and Diamond push back against that whole thing, and while it's still there and still able to happen, and you can still go buy comics digitally, it's never picked up the way it should have, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, like, there was too much pushback from the retailers. So, could DC or Marvel ever go for another company? Sure, it's possible, especially if they could bring the price down. The amount of money it costs to distribute the comics would go down, and they could save money that way. But I don't see it happening, because I don't think there'd be any other company who could do it. This Alterna Comics, by all means, they can do it, but their entire basis of being around is whether or not people actually buy their stuff. They're taking a lot of the risk themselves by distributing the stuff themselves, which could ultimately harm their company in the larger scheme of things, because unless they get some really big name people, which there's already a problem with getting big name people if your books are very, very low cost. So there's a lot of issues that go into it, but I don't see any change coming. But I'll call it now. I mean, like, things will either go completely digital, or the comic market will bust, I'll say 10 years.
What about the print to order stuff?
The print to order stuff is unique, and I think that is entirely possible to do, but I know that Amazon's doing it, and I think it's entirely possible for that to, like, pick up and, gain steam. But the problem is that, like, by any major company like Marvel or DC to start doing something like that, it will eat away at the retailers, and the retailers and Diamond will push back against that. And the problem is, unless it really, really takes off really quickly, they don't have the ability. There's not enough wiggle room for something like that to succeed but at the same time alienating their core sales. And that's the biggest thing. Like, anything they try to introduce is going to alienate those core sales, which is the comic shops, and that by itself could present a problem. So either someone at Warner Brothers is like, hey, you know what? We don't care about the comic shops anymore. We're going to print on demand, all digital. That's what we're doing. And we can make our comics $1 cheaper every single month. Unless someone says we're just going to take the risk and do it themselves, which ultimately, I mean, it could pay off and it could work, because then you could still get stuff printed on demand. You could still choose the variant covers that you want and things like that. But it's more about, will people actually do it? I mean, Amazon is clearly trying to push this with their own imprint and see if it works. And if it works, it'll be like proof positive to these other companies to say like, hey, look, this could work. You could do this, and that's possible too. But I don't know. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love having a paper copy of stuff in my hands. I love being able to hold it in my hands rather than reading stuff in digital. But I just don't see the future, and it's unfortunate because that's just the way it is. I keep up with technology. I know I keep up with a lot of the different trends that are happening within technology and things like that, and I just don't see this market sustaining, especially with some of the ridiculousness that's stuff that happens with the inflation of sales with the variant covers and things like that. I just don't see it working out.
Well, I've been listening to a retailer who goes by the name Comic Perch on Twitter, and he's been doing a major series of YouTube videos recently about predictions for the comic future. And something he said really rang true to me, which is that I think we're on the cusp of newsstands 2.0. We've already seen this with the DC Walmart giants. He thinks that Disney's going to announce Marvel Comics, not exclusive, but like directly available to supermarkets. So like right now they have like resale for 3 or 4 comics in a shrink wrap available at Walmart. I think we're going to see them in your local grocery store chain, just like they did in the 90s and before with the newsstands, the spinner racks. But I think that the idea that DC's been doing of reprints is probably something we're going to see more of, just because it's more content. It increases the value for money that, moms who are shopping with kids are going to want, keeps the kids occupied for longer. And that it mimics, the Japanese model of an anthology format with their shonen magazines. So I think that the future of comics, in terms of new comics, is going to be some combination of a better digital distribution platform and trying to go mainstream again with some form of the news rack.
I mean, that's entirely possible. I don't see that long term working either. I think that just by itself will help sustain the business for a little while, but I don't know that that'll end up saving the market as a whole. Because the other problem is you also have to look at it, newsstands aren't like they were. The newsstands now in today's world are not the same newsstands that they had back in the 90s, or even obviously way before the 90s. Grocery stores that I went to as a young kid had whole sections of magazines and comic books and all kinds of stuff. Every Archie book you can imagine. You can still find Archie books at the checkout lanes at grocery stores, but like when you go to like a store like Target, their selection of magazines is very, very small. They do not have a huge selection. You go, and I don't know about Walmart because, like I've said multiple times, I don't go to Walmart that often, but I can't imagine it being that much bigger, because why would they carry so much more stuff? There's only a few places that still carry large amounts of magazines in their bookstores. Barnes & Noble and other bookstores that are still around. There's not very many of them, but those are the places that carry magazines. And while I completely agree that having comics in the toy aisles alongside the action figures at Target and Walmart is a step in the right direction, I just don't see it ultimately being the push that's going to save the entire market. So, and I'm not trying to claim that you or Perch had said that that's what's going to happen, but I feel like that will help, and that will help maintain the market for a little bit. But ultimately, it's still going to have to go in a direction where either it goes digital or it goes completely bust. And the real telling part will be to see what happens with some of the publishers that aren't as big but have been around for a really long time. Dark Horse, IDW, Image, these companies that have produced stuff for years and years and years, to see what happens with them, because they're the ones who are going to be affected by these changes quicker than most, or quicker than the big two. So, all right. So with that being said, that was our only listener listener question that we had. So I encourage everyone who's listening to leave a question on the next episode, because if it doesn't happen, we'll just keep having crazy Monkey Watch questions. Speaking of Monkey Watch, we're going to get into our Monkey Watch question. Monkey Watch 2017, which is a very quick question. Shouldn't require too much thinking. My co-hosts, of course, did not prepare for this whatsoever because I don't allow them to. So the question of the day is, which superhero could you see yourself being best pals with?
Dang it.
And I'll go first because I knew the question ahead of time. I would pick Tim Drake because I feel like we would get along pretty well. He's into technology. I'm into technology. He's pretty smart. I'd like to think I'm pretty smart. But like, and specifically, you guys could pick whoever. I was specifically thinking of the Bat family and thinking who I would probably get along with the most. And out of the group, I would probably get along with Tim Drake probably better than anybody else, because I think we're very similar personalities. So that's mine.
So, confession time. Junior high and high school, and college, who am I kidding? I was so bad at making friends. And so, one of the easiest things to find in common with people is your name. And so, the first people I always met were Stephanie's, and we usually got along very well. And so, Stephanie Brown, she loves purple, and she seems kind of a fun person to be around, and she seems very smart. I think she and I would actually get along very well, and I would actually introduce myself to her because we have the same name, and because I'm lame, that's the first thing I notice about people.
Do you like waffles?
I do like waffles.
Okay, well then
and grape soda.
You got that for you. You got that for you. So.
Did Dustin pay you to make sure I couldn't pick Steph?
You can pick Steph. I had to do a quick filter, and I was like, oh gosh, who would I actually get along with? Because I'd probably want to punch Damien if we actually spent 5 minutes together.
I think my problem with this is the same problem I have with the question of who would you marry or fall in love with, is I tend to identify with characters I like more than think about whether I'd get along with them, and I don't think I'd get along with myself very often. I'm sure this shocks many people. But who would I get along with? Maybe... Well, no, Cass would know when I was frustrated with people, and so she would probably... because you can read the body language.
Having a friend to call you out on your crap is important.
Yeah,
true.
but like they have to care enough to call you out. Like I'm trying to think who would be willing to get to know
actually
me well
speak
enough.
up. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of characters who really like reading, because that's mostly what I like talking to my friends about. I mean, Jason Todd read books in prison, and he actually read books I care about. Pride and Prejudice was in one of the Grant Morrison comics, or maybe it was Judd Winnick. It was one of the pre-Flashpoint Red Hood stories. So maybe Jason, but I don't really like drinking and fighting, so...
You definitely would be an odd friend couple.
Yeah.
But you know what? What's funny? I think of that, and I think to myself, I would probably compare you closer to Batgirl, the pre...
Oh, Barbara?
Barbara, pre-New 52.
Yeah, okay, I'll go with Barbara. I'd love to hang out with.
Hold on. I'm saying I would compare you to her as, like, you are very similar, but then you think about what happened in Batman and Robin Eternal, where she got along with Jason Todd, like, really well for some weird reason, and I thought, well, maybe it's because they're so opposite that they do get along. So... back to your Jason Todd, maybe it is possible. So
let's go with that. I'll hang out with Jason Todd.
I mean, to be fair, just because you hang out with him doesn't mean you have to hang out with him all the time. You don't have to go to the fights and the bars with him, so there's that. But the question is then presented to you, the listeners. What member of the Bat family, or you could even pick a member of the Rogues Gallery, which person do you think you would best be friends with? Sound off either in the comment section or over on the Discord when the episode posts. We'll talk about those next time. And then obviously be sure to encourage or explain why you think you would get along with them and they would be your best pals. So with that being said, that is everything for this episode. Be sure to head over to the website for all this news related to movies, TV, merchandise, video games, and of course the comics. Also be sure to check out all the other podcasts we have to offer. There's tons of podcasts that are releasing all the time. Any given week, we've got like 3 to 4 episodes releasing. So be sure to check out all the podcasts. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube for all the latest news and videos from the Batman universe. Join our Discord. Leave questions in the comment section on the website. You can leave us reviews on iTunes. Those are always greatly appreciated. Or any of the other podcast platforms that you use. I always say iTunes, but I honestly think that all of the platforms you can leave reviews on. So wherever you listen to this, if you can leave a review, leave reviews. Those are always greatly appreciated for this and any of the other podcasts that we have to offer at the Batman Universe. With that being said, we will see you guys in 2 weeks. This is Dustin.
This is Steph.
And this is Ian.
We'll see you guys next time. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm having to actually question whether or not we brought this up on the last episode because I just...
We did.
Yeah.
We already talked about it.
Oh, man. I'll just start...
Good, I was eating
Start back from the beginning. Yeah. So, Patreon listeners, I hope you enjoyed that.